someone shared with me this gem, and I love this. And they say the nervousness is the respect that we pay our audience because
Correct.
it says we care. It matters to us
Correct.
how we're perceived and how we're received by these people. And so when I'm not nervous, I get really concerned because I'm like, oh, I'm not nervous. That means it may not go well. So I welcome the nerves. It informs me that I'm prepared.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from beautiful British Columbia, Canada, and we are located in Prince George, about 800 kilometers north of Vancouver, or 500 miles north of Vancouver. And British Columbia is a big province. It's another 500 miles north from Prince George is the Yukon border, which is right next to Alaska. And the province east to west is the same distance, so it is physically in the center. Absolutely beautiful. Not much snow yet, but it's all around the corner. Today we have a very interesting guest, Leanne Linsky. Did I say it correct, Leanne?
You did. Perfect.
Yeah. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Yes, and you are located in Seattle,
Yes, I
eh,
am.
in Washington State, and as I said earlier, we are obviously located in British Columbia, so we are on the same time, and we are podcasting around the globe, so we have people watching us from all over the world. So, Leanne, when I looked at your bio, it's very interesting because you are a comedian
Hmm.
professionally, and so that's quite a career. How did you get involved in becoming a comedian?
So I so there's a little bit of a long story, but I'll make it shorter. So what
No,
happened
it's
was
good.
is my family is very funny, funnier than I am for sure. But when I was working for a large corporation, I had to do a lot of public speaking, a lot of events, talking to people, and many of my coworkers were like, "Oh, you should, do something with that." And one particular coworker sat me down one day and he said, "Have you ever considered comedy and maybe taking some comedy classes at the Second City?" And I was like, "Hmm." And then, like, all of a sudden, different things had come up, and I had previously taken a comedy class, and I don't know if I had told people about it back in 2001, a comedy writing class, and then people encouraged me to do these other things and take with the Second City. And then all of a sudden, all these ads started appearing in the local paper that the Second City happened to have a training center that opened up in Las Vegas, where I was living at the time. And I took a class. And after my first class, I walked out and I was like, I'm doing all of this. And I ended up taking classes 2 and 3 times at the Second City Training Center. And 5 years later, I ended up getting laid off from my job that I had been at for nearly 13 years.
Oh, wow.
And one of my friends that I had studied comedy with called me, and I shared the news, and he was like, "Well, I'm moving to New York this summer and I need a roommate. Do you want to go?" And I was like, "Well, I have to think about it." He said, "You have 1 hour." I said,
Oh,
"One
no.
hour?" So I went out for a walk. I came back, I called, and I said, "Sure, I'm in." And I packed up 2 suitcases a month later and moved to New York to pursue comedy and immerse myself full time. So, yeah, so that's where I went with it. I went all in.
How long ago was that, Leanne?
That was in 2006. So I took my first comedy class in 2001. In 2000, May of 2006, I ended up moving to New York. I stayed in New York until for about 9 years. And then I ended up moving to California, and I continued producing shows and doing comedy in California. And then I had this idea because I suddenly found myself spending more time on the freeway than I did on any stage, and I'm like, this is nuts. What am I doing? This isn't how it's supposed to be. And I was like,
Exactly.
how do I solve some of these problems? How do I get out there more without breaking the bank in gas or time. And
Exactly.
so, yeah, so I started experimenting with doing things online. And this is back in August of 2019 BC, as I call it, before COVID. And
Yeah.
so I invited people to do stuff online, and they were like, this is amazing. Like, we can connect with comics we've never met before from coast to coast. And then COVID happened, and suddenly everybody was doing things online.
Exactly.
But yeah, so that's kind of the gist of how I ended up, doing comedy and getting out there.
So you're a very good speaker. That's already obvious to me, and to me that's important because I'm also a professional speaker and
Mhm.
on demand, and the but that didn't come natural to me. By pure coincidence, somebody dragged me into Toastmasters. I was not good at speaking at all until I got the exposure to Toastmasters. And you familiar with Toastmasters?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
I did that for 10 years and became a distinguished Toastmaster. And that gave me the confidence because Toastmasters teaches you, it's all over the world actually, and
Yeah.
particularly in North America, is it teaches you to become a good speaker, but even more importantly, it also teaches you to become a good listener. And it gives and creates, stimulates confidence. And
Yes.
so now the challenge that I would find, if that alone already, for most people, they fear public speaking more than death in a lot of cases. And I was one of them before Toastmasters. But now you're not only speaking, you're expected to be funny.
Yeah.
How do and obviously now 17 years later, or nearly 22 years later, since your first show in 2001, you've gone through that. But even now, if I do presentations, I always feel a bit of anxiety.
Mhm.
You're required to have that to be good, right? So how do you go about a number of
Yeah.
things, that I didn't know there were classes or that you could take for becoming a comedian or comedic speaking. So that is interesting, and the other one is that your material. How do you develop it, and how do you? Is it just a matter of time until you become better and better and better at it,
Mhm.
and that sort of a thing?
Yeah. So, touching on the first thing about, I so appreciate you saying you did Toastmasters, because I think with anything, this is an opportunity to practice to get better. And with me, it was no different. As I mentioned, my parents and my family, my two older brothers are very funny, very quick witted. And so because I would, um, spent my whole life and upbringing, that was kind of our way of coping, our way of communicating with one another, and it just became part of my everyday life.
It
But
became natural to you,
yeah, very much
more or
so. My
less.
dad,
Yeah.
my mom, my dad has extremely good comedic timing. Very, very amazing. And I watched him because he used to be asked to speak at his work. The team that he worked with, they would always ask him to tell the jokes at their holiday party at the end of the
Right.
year. And he would spend months preparing jokes for it, just months. And bouncing them off my mom all the time. And so I really remember that. So when I ended up taking a comedy class, well, even in college before the comedy class, my and in high school, my parents were really encouraging of me when I had to speak and for our presentations and things like that. And they'd make me practice. And I think it was always just taught to me at a very young age that these things require practice. If you
Correct.
want to do something well, you have to practice. And I think that also carries out for, um, as like at the anxiety or the nerves before that. I always have nerves before I speak, but I don't look at it as like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. Someone shared with me this gem, and I love this. And they say the nervousness is the respect that we pay our audience. because
Correct.
it says we care. It matters to us
Correct.
how we're perceived and how we're received by these people. And so when I'm not nervous, I get really concerned because I'm like, oh, I'm not nervous. That means it may not go well. So I welcome the nerves. It informs me that I'm prepared. That it matters to me, and it's like almost a welcome feeling, like it's part of like what happens before I go on stage. So if it's not there, I get concerned. But then to your other point about going up there and, failing or those kind, there's been plenty of times where I've had to perform and it's not going well, or show up and there's only one person in the audience. But I've had those things happen, and other people will be like, well, there's only one person here, we can't do the show. I'm like, there's only one person here. There is one person here who took the time out of their day to show up to see a show.
Exactly.
We're going to
Exactly.
do a show, and
Exactly.
and it will only make us better. Like, it's an opportunity again to practice. So I'm a big advocate of putting in the hours and putting in the time and taking every opportunity to, whatever it is, to learn from it and to move forward. Yeah.
So the area that you work, is it pretty much right across the country, or is it? And then, what are the venues? Are they kind of meaning the public that you're speaking to? Are there? What I get when I make presentations, I usually like to understand a number of things, and you will now relate to me as somebody that understands public speaking and Toastmasters,
Mhm.
and because in a lot of cases, when people make presentations that are maybe respectfully not as skilled, at least 50% of the time something will go wrong with the equipment that you have. So I'm always very particular about what is the equipment, where will my microphone be, what will it kind of look like. I'm a guy that likes to move around a lot. I don't like to
Mhm.
stand behind a lectern. That doesn't work well for me. And so what I usually do is I need to know the setting. I like to be there the day before or the night before to give me a feel of the stage. And then the other part that I like to know, the makeup of my public that are and is there is anything in particular they are looking for, if they want an entrepreneurial speech or a speaking about a particular issue, a topic. I'm in the lumber industry as one. I'm entrepreneurial. I'm an author. I do a number of things, but I always try to find out who is my public so that I can intertwine it in to my presentation. And
Yeah.
then again, depending on the setting, and it's that I like to get a chuckle or a laugh here and there. So if there is something funny that I can intertwine, I would like to do that as well. So that's kind of the way I go about things.
Yeah, I'm actually very similar to you in that. Whenever somebody wants me to speak or do comedy at an event, I always want to know what kind of audience it is. What kind of humor are they looking for? Because although I want to take on a lot of opportunities, I also realize, like, I'm not always well suited for every opportunity.
Right,
And and depending on how far in advance that is, do I have time to write new material, and not just write it, but test it? Because
right.
in you also had mentioned, like, what is that process for writing jokes? It also takes a lot of time to write really good jokes, and those jokes I'll tell for, time after time after time after time after time, and work them and adjust and revise and until I get them right.
Do you
So
bounce
that's
it off your mother?
not it.
No,
Some,
no, I'm just joking. I'm just
yeah.
being funny.
So sometimes
Yeah,
she's sometimes several times in one conversation, because she doesn't always remember now, but
right.
so I can do that. But um, I do bounce it off of. like my husband, but
Sure.
I go to open mics regularly,
Okay.
and I host open mics and I do them online. I have my own online comedy club now, so I make a point of working out stuff every day.
Okay.
And again, it's a muscle. It's like going to the gym. But when it comes to, I think I love so much of what you shared about your preparation of showing up the day before, or knowing what the venue is like. How is your stage? How, where is everything? That is so valuable. And I, in comedy, we don't always get the opportunity to do that. However, I always try to make a point of showing up early. I
Right.
want to see the lay of the land. I want to know where everything is, what the running order will be, and kind of feel of the room and the energy and the vibe, and know what's happening. The other thing is, when it comes to equipment and tech, I really have a huge appreciation. I was just talking to a person the other day. He's a musician, and he was talking about, the preparation that a musician or a band puts together before their show. I mean, they're there loading in, setting up, doing sound checks. And in today's world where technology plays such a important role, especially the more we connect online, um, showing up early is something I encourage people in comedy and speakers. Sometimes people have it in their mind, especially when they're newer, like, I can just show up. I'm not bringing anything to set up. That is a myth. There is so much to take in and prepare, and have so that there's no surprises for us, right?
Exactly.
Because inevitably, the time that we don't, something will go wrong. And
Yeah.
so it's great to know how to handle it. If there's a backup mic, if there's a different source to connect to, if you're doing it online, how do you go about that? So it's crucial. I'm a big fan of all the things you listed and being prepared.
Now, the other thing that is interesting about that, even with all of that,
Hmm.
things go wrong. And
Yeah.
and here you can see me sitting in an apartment building that I own. This apartment here, downtown Prince George. It's a brick building. It's 4 stories high in the corner. So just go with me here. So I'm introducing you to. I say, okay, I'm podcasting you. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to introduce myself, and then I'll talk a little bit about the area that I'm in, and then I introduce my guest, and all of a sudden, the building starts shaking. We got an earthquake that happened to us here. All of a sudden, the whole building started shaking, and so then it was a question. I said, "Oh my!" And the words were okay, other than to say, "I believe we have a earthquake." So we left it all in the podcast. So it made it even more interesting. But so the point that I'm making is simply that the more experience you have, the more you usually know how to deal with things that come up, and then then kind of wind it in, and or deal with it, that it doesn't throw you off your thought pattern that you followed for the particular
Yeah.
presentation.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think for me, several things help in that. Is one, when I took comedy classes, it wasn't just stand up. I started doing improv. So improv is getting a suggestion from the audience and then building scenes and not having any idea what my scene partners were going to say or anything. So it was a master class for many, many years in improvising with the unexpected. And people were always throwing curveballs. And so I think that was so valuable, not just from the aspect of performing, but also I think those types of skills of being able to be flexible and to roll with it and being present can be applied in life. And I know that over the years, the more I studied comedy, that I started showing up differently in conversations and relationships, because I was paying attention to patterns and different nuances that would take place in a you know 2-second conversation, how someone would look at me, how, and all the things that could be read and observed. And really, sometimes we often miss. And I think that again, it goes back to the whole practice thing, right? Because the more we do it and the more familiar we become with things. And then also, um, you probably find this too, but the more prepared you are, if you're speaking and you have your lecture or your speech, I have my comedy set and I have it memorized. And a lot of people are like, I don't like to memorize. But for me, I like to really know what I'm doing. And for comedy, if I ramble with my words, it changes a joke. And if I ramble or if I insert a couple extra words, suddenly my timing's off. Or, I stumble over my words because we write differently than we speak. So although I write my jokes, I now have to practice speaking them. And when I speak them, it doesn't always make sense to read off, how I would read it off a paper. So all of these things come into play. And the better I know my material and what I'm there to speak about, then as I'm speaking, when things happen with the audience, I'm able to better take that in because I'm not in my head searching for what I'm going to say or what I'm supposed to be doing. It frees me up so I can be communicating all the things that I need to, at the same time taking in more information and feedback from my audience. And so if I need to break away from my prepared topic or talk, I can break away and have an engaged and be present in that moment for something that's happening, and then easily go back into where I left off without having to search for it too hard. So yeah, I think I love you know exactly these things, quite experienced.
Yeah, so the part that I found interesting about Leanne is that, and again, looking at my own experience, I was born in Holland in 1940. November the 1st, actually, a couple of weeks ago, I'm 83 years young.
Happy
And,
birthday.
well, thank you. I'm going to go to 120 actually, but yeah, so, but anyway, so that's where I was born. So I grew up speaking dialect actually in Holland, in the extreme northeastern part. So, and I love speaking dialect, but it's different than Dutch in a way. It's not a language, but it's a dialect. So if I speak dialects, the people in Holland wouldn't understand me. So I had to acquire speaking High Dutch, and then by the time I got that kind of under control, I left for Canada. We were liberated by the Canadian Army April the 12th, 1945, and it made such an impression on me that I always knew I would go to the lands of my heroes, and I did in July of 1965. But by the time I got here, I couldn't speak the language, I didn't have a job, and I didn't know a soul. And again, starting from the ground up, and then having a dream of building a lumber mill, which I did.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I had is I wasn't overly confident in already in Holland speaking dialect, and then having to interact in High Dutch was a bit of a challenge. And the other part about it was a lot of people in Holland would hear that you were from a dialect. That means you likely were a farmer coming out of that corner of the country. So that kind of a thing. And so I was already a little bit conscientious of that. And, so then, and already starting to build a business and being okay communicating in the business, but outside of that was more difficult for me. So by coincidence, somebody took me, ex-sister-in-law actually, dragged me over to Toastmasters and said, I said, well, what's it all about? And she said, oh, you like it, just sit down and you can just listen and see what you think. I said, they're not going to ask me anything, are they? No, they're not going to ask you anything. So I was sitting there in the meeting, and they were doing all the things, and all of a sudden in the middle of the meeting, they said, hey, John, tell us something about you. I said, oh my God, I'll never go back here. and so I became then a Toastmaster for 10 years, reached the highest level, distinguished Toastmasters. There are probably 10 million people in the world that have had exposure to Toastmasters in some form or fashion. Probably today there are probably 400,000 people that are members of certain clubs throughout, in particular North America, but other places as well. And in the time that I was there, I've seen some that had really challenges to kind of get through the initial off the ground stage. But I've never seen somebody that was as challenged as me in all that time. But I went through the period, then became better, and then reached the highest level. Become a distinguished Toastmaster, probably of all those ones that took that were big part of Toastmasters, the ones that the distinguished Toastmasters is less than 1% of all those that wanted to go to that level, or needed to. In my case, I found it important to me. So the point that I wanted to make is this one, is that what I liked about Toastmasters is not only speaking, but become a good listener, for one, and being able to articulate the issues, not rambling necessarily. And the other one is that Toastmasters does is to scramble and saying, this is the issue, we want you to speak on that for a minute or 2 minutes. And then you get evaluated. And that again, and that means you give some of the positive feedback and then some of the areas potentially for improvement. So I'm a big believer in Toastmasters, and it in fact changed my life. There was no question about it.
Yeah.
The other thing that was important to me, that was in 1990, and I was a Toastmaster from 1990 to 2000. And then the other part that played a big part in my life is that I was not very good academically. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. And so in 1990, and that 32 years later, after I came to Canada, I walked into a bookstore here and I opened a book, and the book's title was Driven to Distraction. And it was about ADHD. And I said, oh my God, that's me. And so I bought the book and I wrote in Dutch, and now I finally know who I am. And, so that was another part of my life that kind of gave me confidence. Now I always kind of felt I had failed when I was in Holland, failing grade 3 and failing grade 7, and then became learning a trade, and all my friends went to college and university and became whatever. And I felt I had to go physically to Canada to prove myself, for one reason, that I could do it. And so I did that. And then the other part that I did about it is that I felt that at some point I had to talk. I talked more about ADHD and the things around it. And I wrote a book about the ADHD Unlocked.
Wow.
And what I found is that initially, writing and reading the book Driven to Distraction was written by Dr. Hollowell, and I still have it, January 1997, and it kind of changed substantially my life, actually. And the more initially there was so much stigma around it, because I wanted to build a business, and then as I build a business, which I did, what am I going to do? Go to the bank and say, I want to lend from you millions of dollars for building businesses here, there, and the other things, but I have a mental disorder called ADHD, and they say, well, have a nice day. Obviously, that's not being thought about it now that way, but then it was still a lot of stigma around it. But what it did, it kind of changed me. Toastmasters gave me confidence. Then understanding my challenges that I had for all those years until I was into my 60s already, affected by ADHD. And then the more I found out about ADHD is that it's a superpower. And that's how I look at it today. I couldn't do what I'm doing now with all the businesses. I'm not bragging here, I'm just for the purposes of making the point, is I have probably 10 different companies. I'm an author, I'm a public speaker, and then the all of those things I could not have done unless it would have been for ADHD.
Right. That's
And
tremendous.
yes, so that's kind of the area that in my background, and then bringing me to doing presentation. The other thing that it does is amazingly is I'm a good writer, but also I have a very good memory, and about things that interest me at least, and so in presentations that I do, I'm usually I don't script it very much, other than do it as spontaneous as I can, and that works well for me.
Yeah. Well, I can really appreciate how once because what I'm hearing in your story is once you learned what you was going on with you and how your brain works, right? And how you're wired, that informs us of how, okay, now that I know that, that changes how I see everything. It puts sheds new light on things. And I found that too, this is so interesting because as I talk to people in comedy and people, I've watched so many people at my open mics over the years and things like that. And as people start talking, like you had mentioned, there was a stigma around ADHD in the past. And the more we are able to talk collectively on these topics, the more education we receive on them, the more awareness there is around them. And it's very freeing. And I love that you now see it as your superpower because I feel like just knowing is got to be such freedom in that. And I know, like, as I mentioned, watching other comedians and performers talk, oftentimes when they'd get up in front of a microphone and start talking, we typically are best at talking about what we know.
Right.
And so I hear that in your story because now it just like cracked you open and it's like, oh my gosh, this is who I am. And it propelled you into success. And a lot of new comedians and new performers starting out, they're like, well, what should my brand be? And it's like, wait a minute, your brand. First, you figure out who you are and speak from your truth and what you know. And that's where people are successful is being that themselves, talking from their own experience and letting that move them forward. So what a great story.
Yeah, and the other thing, Leanne, that it does is podcasting has helped that process as well.
Yeah.
And, a, a lot of times, and that's absolutely correct, is that, the people are not interacting anymore the way they used to be because they are so
Yep.
preoccupied with their iPhones and their computers and all the other things. So the conversations that used to be there at one time are not quite there like they used to be. And now what I believe is that podcasting, relatively new,
Mhm.
really, if you look back at it, and so, and I think it is just on the very, very beginning where it is going to explode, much further, much deeper, and where you and me are sitting here, like we getting to know each other
Mhm.
and although we are relatively close, but still you're in Seattle and I'm in the center of British Columbia, probably 800 miles away from each other. But at the same time, as you probably have as well, I'm podcasting with people from around the world,
Yeah.
and it's amazing how we can do that. Because when I first started podcasting, we did it here, mainly of the region around us, and it's not as big as it is Seattle. This area here probably has about 100,000 people in the area. Prince George has about 80,000 in the outlying area. We have an amazing amount of very, very interesting people, and we did it all in person. And I was thinking about then looking forward at podcasting, setting up a studio maybe in Vancouver, to have a larger group. But the more I thought about it, and the more we looked at it, is saying, how about virtual?
Yeah.
And so as we are doing that now, we have good equipment. So do you. We can sell that right away. Is that
Hmm.
it works fabulous.
Yeah, it really does. And I agree with you. I've been doing comedy for a long time, and even before COVID, like I said, my one of the struggles I had, it's like it takes a long time to get anywhere in LA. Like just going 2
Exactly.
miles could take, over 30 minutes. So, bringing things online was a game changer for me. And so that's why I created my own company with an online comedy club just for that reason. Because what about all the people who don't have the luxury in life to pick up 2 suitcases and move to New York City or to
Exactly.
LA, And we're meeting all of these incredible humans from all over the world. And so like one of the mics on Plauzzable, we had a comedian from Sri Lanka. We've had a comedian from Ireland, Canada, the US. We have people from the UK, all Japan. So like anytime we log in to do comedy, what I walk away afterward feeling is like, wow, here we have people all over the world and we can all come together and laugh about so many things that are so relatable to each one of us. Relationships are funny to everybody. This is funny to and it's just such a wonderful way to connect, that we just didn't have, 20 years ago. And it's just mind blowing the opportunity that lies ahead. That's what I'm seeing with it all.
And
So yeah,
it's only at the beginning, Leanne, in my
yeah,
opinion. This is just all starting.
yeah.
So and it is so rewarding in terms of the interaction with people from all over the world, and bringing back that the ability of interacting with somebody here for an hour about things that are close to us. It's amazing, and I find it really enjoyable.
Yeah.
So the commonly, so are you online then also with
Mhm.
and so what is the website?
So it's plauzzable.com, Plauzzable, like like plausible.
Okay.
Um, and it's a online comedy club. So basically, any comedian can create an account, and I give them the virtual stage, the scheduling tools, the ticketing services, everything they need in order to perform online. And then comedy fans can log in and they can select the show they want to see. They can look through the talent directory at all the comedians that are on there. They can see a bunch of free shows and mics, or they can choose to pay for a show if they want to do that. So it's just a great way for people all over the world to connect and laugh together. So that's
and
what
to
I've created.
showcase and to
Yeah.
showcase their art, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And so have you had that for has that been in place for quite a while?
Yeah, I
Possible.
started when I started doing it, I used existing technologies like my MVP, my minimum viable product, to see what could we do with this. And then that was before COVID, and then COVID happened and everybody was using Zoom and Google and those things. But as a comedian, we needed certain things, like we can't do comedy with audio delays or cutouts. It needs to be in real time or it throws the timing off and
Right.
it makes it really challenging. And then we need certain screen layouts because as a performer, I need to see and hear the audience's response because not everybody laughs out loud. It's like,
Exactly.
uh, so what I did is I ended up hiring a team and we built our own technology in order to make this happen. And so when you log in, there's like a whole directory of comedians to look through. There's like, remember TV Guide, if you will, like,
Yeah, yeah.
when you had to be home at a certain time to watch everything. So everything happens in real time. It's live. Like you and I
Right.
are speaking live right now.
Exactly.
So the shows are not pre-recorded like on YouTube. That anybody, you could go to YouTube and look up anything you want. But in this case, it's like real-time interactive where the audience can see and hear the performer, and the performer can see and hear the audience, and everybody can see each other. So
So
yeah,
the
we
way it
created
sounds,
that.
the way it sounds to me, Leanne, is that I think it's very, very interesting because it sounds to me it's a whole new model
Yeah,
or
it is.
platform, if you wish.
Mm-hmm.
So, are there others that are doing similar things that you do, or are you unique in what you are doing?
I'm pretty unique in what I'm doing. Other people, like have mentioned to me, like they've tried doing similar things in the past using existing technologies. Some people have created like apps to download on the phone to do things, but mine is cloud based, and for you to log in on a laptop, on a computer. Um, you can, it is now mobile friendly, so you can log in on a phone, but it's not, yeah. So, yeah, it's the only thing exactly like it as far as I know.
Right. So, and that
Mhm.
is all part of the evolution, right? Of if you look back, that I don't know how we connected, if it was through Podmatch or,
Yes.
that, yeah, it was Podmatch, and
Mhm.
Podmatch has been very successful.
Yeah.
A relatively new model, in my opinion. I hope I'm podcasting the principle of Podmatch in the next couple of weeks, I think. So that'd be
Mhm.
kind of interesting, and but it's all things that are happening as we speak. It's all still very, very early, and basically, but we're looking at those major platforms like Facebook, obviously YouTube, and on and on and on, and but all of that is still evolving further into
Yeah.
special areas like yours,
Mhm.
and I think that's very exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. I spent a lot of time researching it, and I ended up, when I had the idea and I started testing it, I thought, how can I scale it, right? How can I really make it bigger and help more people put themselves out there and actually earn money, because a lot of people don't realize that performers don't earn a lot of money if they
No,
earn money at all, right? And how do I solve that problem? So I actually went back to school at the age of 50 and got my master's degree in innovation and entrepreneurship at University of California, Irvine, so that I
amazing.
could immerse myself into the entrepreneurial ecosystem, because I was like, I need to know other people who are aspiring to do bigger things, and connect with them and resources, and it was a wonderful decision to do it. And ever since then, I got involved, right after graduation. I was involved in an incubator, and from there it led me to an accelerator and another accelerator, where I'd get mentors and other people who are really helpful with resources and connections and feedback. And just like comedy or public speaking in business, it's so important to get that feedback all the time. Not just know who my audience is, but know who my customer is, who my user is, what their needs are, and constantly circling back to that. Yeah.
Amazing, and then from there on in, obviously has found a platform,
Hmm.
and it grows further and further, right? And
Yeah.
as I understand it from what you were saying earlier, you have people globally participating, including Japan and other places, and so that if somebody wants to look at it plausible, then it gives them a constant access to the different talents that you see from all over the world, really.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if you don't live in New York or LA, or you're not in a major city anywhere where you have a comedy club or a venue to go to, you can log in and see it live. You don't have to just stream something that was pre-recorded or that you're not participating actively in. And people, like, we just did a fundraiser for a nonprofit on their several comedians got together and put on a show, and it was remarkable. And some of the feedback was like, wow, that was very intimate. I felt like I was in a room full of my friends, being able to talk to the comedians before and after the show. That's not something you get to do even in person. So it was really cool.
Yeah, that is no different than like the comments that I made earlier. We were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
There you are in Seattle, and I'm
Yeah.
sitting here across from you, like for all intents and purposes, like you are here. You know,
Yep.
so if we are doing life ones, I be sitting here, you be sitting here, but the feeling that I have here is equal to, and you know, to have the same feeling of and from the audience perspective, it's so amazing. But it's not all that long ago that a lot of these, was it Zoom or other things before that, where you simply couldn't do this. It would be interrupted, or this was not right, or that was not right, it didn't sound right. But it is amazing, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I even in a normal day-to-day life, right? And talking, like I talk to my parents via the Facebook portal. Have you ever seen one of those? I think they've
No.
discontinued them now. They're kind of like a tablet, and it's a video call through Facebook Messenger.
Okay.
And so my it just makes it super easy for me to contact my parents. They just tap the screen when it rings, and
Right.
then my video appears on. They don't have to do anything else. It just automatically, I'm there. They have no idea. They're like, they think it's connected to their phone, but it's not. It's not. It's just all Facebook. But
Right.
it's so cool because I can sit there, my husband and I can sit there and have a conversation with my parents as though we're sitting in their living room,
Yeah.
and we can talk for a really long time. It's just such a different energy than what we were accustomed to growing up and being on a telephone or having to write a letter, you know. So
I was in a conversation, maybe another podcast, I forget now what it was, but yesterday, and talking about, you know, when I came here 60 years ago in 1965, virtually, my parents were in Holland, and I would send a telegram to them, you know, I'm okay, I found a job over, and then send me some more money over, you know, and then
yep.
wait for them to come back out, send letters back and forth. Now you just pick up your cell phone, you can call them direct, and you know, and so, and that's all in a very short period of time, and it appears like COVID probably had something to do with it too. Is that
Yeah.
pre-COVID we were doing some, not really podcasting, but in a way we were working with one of the video studios here that where we did interviewing on certain things, and then COVID came, and obviously we couldn't go there anymore then, and say, what we do now? And say, well, how about the apartment? Maybe we turn it into a studio. And then started, as I said earlier, with the guest, and then me thinking in my mind, I have to then have a studio elsewhere,
Yeah.
until I say, well, I look at CNN and the other channels, and you know, they have three faces on there, and everybody looks like they are all together, and maybe that's the way to go, and obviously it was. And then making sure that the picture is right and the voices are right, and it is really feeling like you and me are sitting here together.
Yeah, it does. It's really fascinating. And I have to say, like, as much as I love the technology, I do miss getting mail. I do miss
Yeah,
getting those letters. I have
yeah.
boxes of all the letters from, you know, when I was a kid, and like that was such a big deal of going to your mailbox. Now I open my email, I'm like, what has happened? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
not the
no,
same.
yeah, I do the same. Actually, it saves all the letters from the past, you know. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
okay, so yeah, very interesting, Leanne. So, where do you go from here? You know, what? Obviously, you have your platform that is working very, very well, very, very successful. Does it mean you still do a lot of traveling and doing venues where you have to be physically involved?
Well, that's a really good question. I do not do a whole lot of traveling at all anymore, especially after COVID. I'm really focused 100% on my business, and I spend most of my time doing everything online. And I've really come to enjoy it so much. So it's funny because I just moved to Seattle a couple of years ago, and people are like, "Oh, what's the scene like in Seattle?" I'm like, "I hear it's great." I don't know
Yeah,
because I don't do those same things anymore. And it's the other interesting thing I'll add to that is that I've noticed that a lot of the comedians and people on my platform, we have a very diverse group of people, but there are a large number of people of a certain age and older. And we're just at a point where we're like, it is so nice to be able to do what we love, but we don't have to necessarily stay out all night or sit in a bar to make that happen.
exactly.
And yeah, and the other great thing about I don't think that anything will replace in person, because in person there's a human aspect to it that's magical, and I just don't think that can ever change. But I think there's also a magic to doing things online and connecting with people in a way that we wouldn't have otherwise. And there's also this huge convenience and also accessibility to those who might not otherwise have it. And the older I get, I also appreciate that more. So yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, so I'm really enjoying the podcasting
Hmm.
and kind of exploring setting up a platform actually and seeing that going beyond what I'm doing now. Obviously, I've been very active speaking as well, but more and more interacting, on the podcasting and doing quite a few of them, obviously 13, 14 a month.
Yeah.
And then the other part that I've done is I the had a fairly, as you already noticed, very interesting life actually in a way,
Hmm.
and a lot of people said to me, you should write a book about it, and so writing books is not easy, and so I
No.
started doing that, and I started and stopped and started and stopped and started and stopped it. So I wrote a book. I said, if I'm not going to do it now, it will never happen. So I wrote a book, Against All Odds, and it's audio as well. And it's not about how successful John is, but more about all the challenges along the way, the ups and downs. So I really enjoy doing that. And then the second one that I wrote is the ADHD. And then I wrote another one that gave me an opportunity. I like what I'm doing, and and I found that a lot of young people, in particular, don't really know what they want to do, and saying, they go to school and they say, what do you want to do for a career? I say, well, I don't know. Or they go to university, I don't know. So, and I think it is very important to find something you like to do. Actually, this afternoon, just before we did this, I had the opportunity to be supported by we do a fair amount of in the community. That to me is always important, in the culture and the community. So I went to a school and did a presentation there, and helped them to support something they were doing. A play of some sort, and they needed some lumber, so we supplied some lumber, and then I spoke to them and then gave them copies of my book that I wrote and came out in July the 15th, Finding Your Passion, Living the Dream. And I'm going to sign these and send them to you, all three of them. And so I think there were 60 kids, and 62 or so. We got 62 books. We signed them all and gave them all to them this afternoon, and it was such a pleasure to being able to do a short presentation to them and talking about finding your passion and doing all those things. I,
That's
I saw
incredible.
I saw a thing on one of the major U.S. channels. I don't know if it was CNN or somebody, and they said 70% of the people that are working don't like their jobs. And of the 70%, 75% of them are looking for another job. And I said, how unfortunate, right?
Hmm.
That it is so important, to find something you like to do. And if you're not liking it, find something else, because otherwise, if you're not happy, you take that with you all around you, and everybody in your circle is affected by it.
Yeah.
And so to me it has always been the attitude, passion, work ethic to me is very, very important. I'm always positive, no matter how tough things are. If it is difficult today, tomorrow will be better. The glass is always half full.
Yeah.
And then finding that passion, liking what you do. Even now at 83, I'm still going to work. I'm working hard, and I love every day. I get up at 5:30, and I always think I'm late, and I always make my bed before I get there.
Yep.
So
Yeah. I appreciate what you're saying because I I I really believe that I don't know that work is something we'll ever always like all of. And I'm a fan of, if we're doing something, find the joy in that. Look, where's the gratitude in that? Look for that in every day, because I feel like sometimes if I think of what the grass is greener on the other side, or I want to do something else, how can I use where I'm at today to propel me towards that? Or how can I be grateful for what I have today to so that when what these other things I want come into my life, I'm ready for them and I can accept them in. So I hear, because when people say, "Oh, I don't like what I'm doing," and you know how people will job hop and things like that in the never ending search of that perfect thing, and I'm like, I laugh because I understand it, but I'm also at a place where I know um, that I'm never going to find the happiness in something else if I can't find the happiness or joy of where I'm at.
exactly,
Yeah,
yeah, and that's very much the case, right?
yeah. Yeah, and I think there's so and I know, like, I read about your story and your background about you've had such an interesting life and have done really cool things, built these businesses and wrote these books, um and I really appreciate how you continue doing and learning new things and putting yourself out there in a different way and taking what you've known. You're not resting on the laurels of
No,
yesterday. You're pursuing your new ones of tomorrow. And I think when I think about where I go from here, it's funny because in my mind I'll have these ideas and everything, and at the same time I look back and I'm like, whenever I have a plan, someone else has a bigger plan. And
yeah.
I have to use those improvising skills to kind of roll with it. And how do I use all of these, my failures and my successes, and incorporate them as I go forward and make a new plan? And I think that's kind of the beauty of it. And that's what I hear in your story. And when I was like reading up on you and everything, I'm like, I just think that's so, so cool that how you got where you are today.
The other part, Leanne, is that we are so fortunate living where we are living, and that is
Mhm.
in North America, United States, Canada, and then looking around the world and seeing all the things that are happening in Europe, Ukraine, and in the Middle East. How
Yeah.
lucky we are, And I fly a lot. We have a place in Victoria. Every week I go down there on Fridays, come back on Mondays, and sit by the window. And I look outside the window and I say, "It's paradise." You know
Mhm.
how lucky we can get. You
Yeah.
know, so and that's so important.
Yeah.
Leanne, it was anything else comes to mind that you wanted to mention, or
I just thank you so much for having me on and chatting with you this afternoon. This has been really wonderful.
and mention once more your website so that the people from around the world
Yeah.
can.
Yeah, it's plauzzable.com. Plauzzable.com.
Leanne, it was a pleasure and a privilege to have you on my podcast. And we'll stay in touch. I'll send you the books, I'll sign them for you, and we'll send them out tomorrow.
Thank you so much. I look forward to reading them. I appreciate it. Thank you
Okay,
again.
Leanne. Check out.
All
Bye
right,
bye.
bye-bye.